Hey everybody, ABC 10 meteorologist Brendan Minchef. I'm here with a water recap and this thing, it's called a La Nina. We're going to talk about that. There's been an update to the La Nina forecast and we are going to see that INSO pattern changing over the next few months. We'll talk about that in a second. First, I do want to talk about the snowpack. This is what the snowpack looked like on January 31st, before all the snow that we had over the last 2.5 weeks or so across Northern California. The numbers at the end of January, start of February were really not good. We're only 40% of that April 1st average statewide. The Northern Sierra was doing the best. I mean, look at the Central Sierra at the end of January, start of February, only 36% of April 1st average. And again, as we talk about a lot, April 1st is important because it's typically our peak snowpack. So it's an important number, important indicator to give context as to where we're at. Here's where we are now. Following all the snow that we had in the month of February, statewide, we're now 74% of April 1st average. Look at this, Northern Sierra, 119% average to date, 93% of the April 1st average. Central Sierra did a lot of catching up as well, 90% of the average to date, 71% of April 1st average. Southern Sierra, 74% average to date, 59% of that April 1st average. So again, these numbers in the dark blue here are the really important ones, that percent of April 1st average. And the fact that the Northern Sierra is at 93% is good news. Remember, most of our big water supply reservoirs are up in the far northern part of the state. So the more rain and snow that we have up in the far part of California, the better it is for all of California. Let's talk about Sacramento now. Here are the numbers for downtown. Look at this. 4.32 inches of rain in the month of February in downtown Sacramento. We average to date, again, as of about February 20th, we average about 2.61 inches. That means we are 1.71 inches to the good for the month of February. Now, for the rainy season as a whole, which started October 1st, we started off very well. November, December were really good months in terms of rain for us, but then January came around and man, it was dry. One of the driest Januaries that we've had in Sacramento in quite some time. And that meant we ended up falling a couple inches behind on the water year. But then, as we just talked about, February came in. It's been very wet to this point. That caught us back up. So the total so far, 12.32 inches in downtown Sacramento. Average today, 12.6. So we're only about 0.3 of an inch behind where we would normally be to this point in the water year. So definitely February's undone most of the damage that January did for sure. But if we got just a couple more storms in January, it'd be a different story where Northern California would be entirely above average. But hey, we'll take what we can get. Statewide, here are the numbers. The total amount of precipitation that's fallen since October 1st. We'll put this into some more context here. The departure from normal, Redding and Eureka, about 9 and 8 inches above normal on the water year, respectively. Not bad numbers in the Sacramento Valley and the San Joaquin Valley. Close to average, a little bit below average by an inch or two in Stockton and Modesto. Really, though, the concerning part has been Southern California, as we know, because of the wildfires we've had down there in January. LA is about 5 inches below average. San Diego over 5 inches below average. Palm Springs more than 2 inches below average. Santa Barbara, look at this, 7 inches less than they normally get through February 20th. So definitely we need some more rain down in Southern California. We had a little bit of improvement with the most recent rainfalls over the last couple of weeks, but it just, we need a lot more at this point in order to drag Southern California out of the drought. So here's what the drought monitor looked like last week on February 13th. Especially look at Southern California in that extreme drought category, right? D3 there. But here's what it looks like as of February 20th. We definitely saw some improvement, especially near Bakersfield, right? In the lower part of the valley. We've seen some improvement in the Santa Monica Mountains, in the LA Basin as well. This has chipped away. However, far Southern California, down into San Diego County, Imperial County, San Bernardino counties, it is definitely rough down there in terms of precipitation. San Diego can't seem to buy any rain so far this water year. Here are the detailed numbers. About 15% of the state in that extreme drought category, 10% of the state in the severe category. Overall, this number here, the Drought Severity and Coverage Index, is at a 139. The lower the number, the better. Last week, it was at 177. So that does mean statewide drought has improved by about 20%. But I do want to add this little qualifier here. Remember what I said a few minutes ago. Most of the state's water supply reservoirs are in the far northern part of California. So if we had drought, you would rather it be in Southern California because you want those reservoirs really full because those reservoirs provide water to all of California. So the fact that we are not seeing any drought basically from Sacramento to the north is good news. The reservoirs are full, right? We have a lot of water in places like Shasta Reservoir, in places like Trinity and Oroville, right? This is good news that we've had the rain, we've had the snow in the far northern part of the state. Of course, you'd rather we have rain everywhere, but certainly the fact that we can fill those reservoirs, the fact that there's water in those reservoirs will mitigate the extreme drought that we're having, at least to some degree, down in Southern California. Now, there's still time for us to see some more rain, right? March is also a wetter month for us on average. We'll talk about that in a second, but sticking with Sacramento, we'll compare where we are so far this water year to years past. We're at just over 12 inches there. The water year prior, last winter, 16.37, so we're still about 4 inches below last year. But remember, these are complete water years, right? So October 1st to September 30th. We still have at least a couple more months of some decent rain coming in. So that number's not final yet. 22-23 was a really good year for us. 26.25 inches of rain. The 30-year average is 19.2. So 22-23 was above average. Last year was below average. This year we are still below average, but there's time for us to make up at least a little bit of that deficit. Now, here's what I was talking about with the average monthly rainfall. December, January, February are by far our wettest months when we average 3.5 inches or more each of those months. Now, March is less compared to December, January, February, but still we average almost 3 inches of rain in March. So there's definitely time for us to continue to make up some of the deficits that we're seeing right now. April can go either way, but generally we still get about 1.5 inches of rain in April. Then May is when we kind of see that transition from the wetter season to the much drier season when we average less than 1 inch of rain in May. So again, March, still got some time to erase some of those deficits that we've seen so far. There's a La Niña in place, and this is kind of why we've seen a drier than average winter, because we typically expect La Niña winters to be drier than average, especially down in Southern California. And that's, again, what we've seen. This is a textbook example of what La Niña looks like. Basically, southern half of California is much drier than average. Again, that's what we've seen this year. The northern part of California kind of can be 50-50 in some cases, but certainly the far northern part of the state is looking like this, where it's much wetter than average. Here's what La Niña looks like right now. It's a weak La Niña, about 0.6 degrees Celsius below average, which at least when you talk about right now, technically doesn't make it La Niña, but we average that over a 3-month period. And so it's still definitely well into the La Niña category. But here's what's important is this area right here off the coast of South America. What we'll typically see when La Niña starts to fade out is we'll start to get some periods of warmer than average water off the coast of South America. And that's what we see when we look at the sea surface temperature anomaly right now. However, let's dig into that a little bit more. With weak La Niñas, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a dry winter for us in Northern California. In fact, we average about 90 to 100% of average precipitation in the Sacramento Valley. In Southern California, a different story, 80 to 90%. So definitely we would expect it to be drier there. This year is definitely historically dry in Southern California. But I do want to point this out. The two most recent drought-busting years both happened in La Niña winters, but we've also had very dry, weak La Niña winters. 2017-18, just 76% of average in the Sacramento Valley. So that's just a little context. Here's the deep dive into the La Niña numbers now. And you can see that 3-month average there, definitely we're well into La Niña status. Again, with that ocean temperature anomaly for February, we're running about minus 1.2 degrees Celsius. So below average, right? That's that temperature anomaly. Here's another thing that we look at. This is ocean temperature depth. So this is the surface of the ocean, right? The top of the water. And then here we're about 100 meters deep. Now we're 200, 300, 400, 500 meters deep. and your equator, your international date line, 0 degrees, is about out that way. 180 degrees, right, is about that direction. So right about halfway. And what we typically see in La Nina is that the trade winds are strong. So it keeps pushing the water this direction. So we get a pile up of warmer water out here in Oceania, right? But then below the surface, you get what's called these Kelvin waves, and it pushes that water right underneath, and kind of cooler water starts to upwell off the coast of South America. That's the kind of cycle that we see here. I do want to show you the ocean temperature depth anomaly. We're looking at the same thing, but instead of looking at the actual ocean temperature, we're looking at whether it's warmer than average or cooler than average. So we see kind of that warm pooling, right? 1-2 degrees Celsius above normal out in the Oceania, right? Out near Australia, out near Papua New Guinea. But once you work your way off towards the coast of South America here, then we're starting to look at water that's 2 degrees below average, 3 degrees below average. So this tells us that La Nina is still alive and well. We're still having that warmer water kind of stuck out in the western Pacific, but then underneath, that current continues to push below average water up off the coast of South America. This will upwell and then again gets pushed out into the equatorial Pacific. So this tells us La Nina is still here for now, but the water's not as cool as it necessarily has been all winter, and the spaghetti models reflect this fact that we're going to see a transition out of La Nina sometime during the spring months. So here's where we are right now. We're running about 0.5 degree Celsius below average out in the equatorial Pacific. The spaghetti models very clearly start to bring us into a more neutral phase by the time, and I should qualify this by saying this is measured in 3-month periods, not just 1 month, but 3-month periods. So the letters that you see down here, like right now, we're in January, February, March. Next time period will be February, March, April, then March, April, May, then April, May, June. So again, 3-month period. So during the springtime, we're going to see this transition to neutral conditions, and we may stay neutral headed through the summer. As you can kind of see, there's more disagreement once we get beyond about June, July, August. Some of the models are taking us into a weaker El Nino. A lot of the models keep us neutral or a little bit below average, which could put us back into a weak La Nina. So could we see El Nino? We may. Could we stay in neutral or La Nina conditions? That kind of seems like maybe that'll be what's going to happen as we go through the summer into the fall. This is very scientific. This is very in-depth here. Let me put it another way. These are probabilities. This comes from the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center, and those forecasters are basically looking at the numbers. They're looking at some of the maps that we just looked at, and they're building their forecast. What are the chances that we stay in La Nina? What are the chances we move to neutral? What about El Nino? So January, February, March, right, there's a better than 90% chance that's going to be La Nina because of everything we looked at. Remember the upwelling of that cooler water. But look at the February, March, April. Now we're seeing still better than 50%, about a 60% chance we stay in La Nina through April. But there is about a 40% chance that the neutral conditions return. Then look what happens in March, April, May. In that 3-month time period, now it's about a 65% chance that we go into a neutral phase of the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, right? In April, May, June, May, June, July. June, July, August, still seeing neutral as the favored condition. But you start to see in the red shading here, El Nino does start to gain a little bit of traction as we head in towards the fall months, late summer into fall. Once we look at September, October, November, again, this is many months away, right? 6+ months out. Now we've got La Nina running about, we'll say 35% chance or so. Neutral conditions running a little bit better than 40%. And El Nino running at about 20% chance. So like any weather or climate forecast, it gets more chaotic the further out you go. So the numbers aren't quite, you can't quite take them to the bank. But certainly what this is showing us is the overall ENSO pattern is changing. So it's not necessarily likely that we'll stay in La Nina for next winter. Does that mean it'll be El Nino? No. It could be neutral. Does it mean that we definitely won't be La Nina? No. It could be a situation where La Nina redevelops. It's just something that we will keep an eye on as we go through the summertime. But that latest update from the Climate Prediction Center came out last week, but because we're in storm mode, we didn't really have time to talk about it. Now things are a little quieter. We can get into the nitty-gritty of kind of the overall weather pattern and the teleconnections and all the things that drive weather and climate across the West Coast and here in California. If you enjoyed this deep dive into all the data and all the climate modeling and whatnot, I recommend you download the ABC 10 Plus app. It's live, it's local, it's always on wherever you stream. There's more extended forecasts, weather explainers like this one. We even have some weather, water, and climate specials. That's all under the Weather Playlist tab on the ABC 10 Plus app. Thanks for watching.